Get ready because we're diving into the world of heme. Yeah, it's one of those things you probably don't think about a lot,
Right.
but it's actually crucial for keeping you alive.
Absolutely.
You probably connect it with blood, which makes sense.
It's essential for red blood cells.
Exactly. It's essential for those red blood
Yeah.
cells. But heme does way more than just that.
It's a busy little molecule.
It really is.
Involved in so many things.
We're talking oxygen transport,
Yeah.
energy production,
Uh-huh.
even detoxification.
It's a fascinating molecule.
So in this deep dive, we're going to uncover how this tiny molecule is made,
Okay.
how it's broken down, and what happens when things go wrong.
Sounds good.
So before we get into all that, what exactly is heme?
Well, at its heart, heme is a metalloporphyrin.
Metalloporphyrin.
Yeah.
That sounds complicated.
It does sound a bit complicated.
Yeah.
But just picture this.
Okay.
You have an iron ion
Okay.
held within a ring-like structure
Okay.
called a porphyrin.
Yeah.
So it's like a tiny crown
Exactly.
holding a precious gem.
A perfect analogy.
I like that.
Yeah.
And it's the creation and destruction of these little crowns that make our bodies tick.
It's the cycle of heme
Yes.
that's essential for life.
So let's start with the construction process. How do we build one of these crowns?
Imagine a molecular assembly line.
Okay.
It starts with two simple building blocks.
Okay.
Glycine, which is an amino acid,
Uh-huh.
and succinyl-CoA, a molecule involved in energy production.
So it's like using basic ingredients to create this complex molecule.
That's a great way to put it.
Like turning flour and sugar into a fancy cake.
I like that analogy.
But I imagine just like a recipe.
Yes.
There are some crucial steps.
to mention
Jason.
heme.
Heme synthesis has what we call a rate-limiting step,
Rate limiting.
a bottleneck
Uh-huh.
controlled by an enzyme called ALA synthase.
ALA synthase.
Yeah.
And this is like the slow oven that determines how fast we can make that cake. So if something messes with that enzyme,
Yeah.
it throws off the whole heme production.
It can really disrupt the whole process.
And to make it even more interesting,
Yes,
we actually have two types of this ALA synthase.
we do.
It's like having two different ovens for different types of cakes.
That's a good way to think about it.
So we have one that's mainly active in the liver,
That's right.
keeping things running smoothly,
Uh-huh.
and the other is found in the bone marrow,
Yeah,
specializing in hemoglobin production for our red blood cells.
exactly.
So one's for everyday maintenance,
Yes.
and the other one's for keeping our blood oxygenated.
It's a specialized system.
Wow. It's a really smart system.
It is.
And how do our bodies know when to stop making heme?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Our bodies have these amazing checks and balances.
Okay.
Excess Heme actually acts like a brake.
A break.
Yeah, it slows down the liver's ALA synthase.
Oh, wow.
It's like a sensor that says, hey, we've got enough cake for now.
So we don't just keep making heme and heme and heme and heme.
Exactly.
Because we start with these basic ingredients,
Yeah.
glycine and succinyl-CoA.
Uh-huh.
How do we actually go from those to the final heme molecule?
It's a multi-step process. A
Multi-step.
series of enzymes, each performing a specific transformation.
Okay, so it's like assembling that fancy cake,
Precisely.
step by step.
Step by step.
Okay, so first, glycine and succinyl-CoA combine to form ALA,
Right.
and then two ALA molecules join to create porphobilinogen.
Yes.
That's a mouthful,
It is a bit of a mouthful.
but that's the foundation for our porphyrin ring.
You got it.
It's like building the base of our molecular crown.
A good way to visualize it.
What happens next?
Well, next fast, 4 of those porphobilinogen molecules come together,
Okay.
like puzzle pieces,
Uh-huh.
forming a chain that gets reshaped and modified
Okay.
into a ring structure
Okay.
called uroporphyrinogen III.
Uroporphyrinogen III.
Don't worry about the name too much. The important thing is this molecule undergoes further transformations,
Okay.
eventually becoming protoporphyrin IX.
So we're building up the crown
We
step by step,
step by step.
and then finally the grand finale.
Yes, the grand finale.
An enzyme called ferrochelatase inserts that iron ion
Uh-huh.
into protoporphyrin IX,
Yes.
and voila, we have heme.
We have heme.
It's like placing the gem in the crown.
a perfect image.
So we've gone from these basic building blocks
Mm,
to this complex molecule.
It's an amazing process.
It really is. It's a bit of a molecular miracle.
It is.
But I imagine things don't always go perfectly on this assembly line.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Sometimes errors can occur in this intricate process.
And that's when we get problems.
That's when we see a group of disorders known as porphyrias.
Porphyrias.
Yeah, imagine a glitch in the cake recipe where you end up with a buildup of half-baked ingredients,
Oh, no.
each causing a different problem.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how a tiny error could have a big impact.
It can.
So tell me more about these porphyrias.
Well, essentially, porphyrias happen when the heme production line malfunctions
Okay.
due to a genetic issue
Uh-huh.
or sometimes even environmental factors.
Yep.
And depending on where that breakdown happens,
Yes.
different intermediates build up, causing a range of problems.
So different porphyrias are like different cake disasters.
I like that.
Some might have a soggy bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Others might be burnt to a crisp.
That's a good way to visualize it.
So we can categorize them broadly
Yeah.
as erythropoietic,
Yeah.
affecting the bone marrow,
Right.
and often causing skin problems,
Uh-huh.
and hepatic, impacting the liver,
Yes.
and potentially leading to anything from chronic skin issues
Yeah.
to sudden bouts of pain and neurological symptoms.
It's a wide range of potential problems.
It sounds like these porphyrias can really throw a wrench in things.
They can.
So can you give me an example of what someone with a porphyria might actually experience?
Let's take Porphyria cutanea tarda, the most common type.
Porphyria cutanea tarda.
Yeah, for people with this condition, things like iron overload,
Okay.
alcohol, even infections like hepatitis C
Oh, wow.
can trigger a buildup of certain molecules in the skin,
Okay.
making it incredibly sensitive to sunlight.
Sensitive to sunlight.
Yeah, imagine getting painful blisters just from stepping outside on a sunny day.
Ouch.
It can be really debilitating.
Yeah, that does not sound fun.
No, it doesn't.
So these porphyrias really show what happens when heme production goes wrong.
They do.
But what happens to heme once it's served its purpose?
Good question.
Yeah, does it just disappear?
It's actually quite the opposite.
Oh.
Heme is constantly being recycled,
Okay.
primarily from aging red blood cells.
So it's not just a one-time use?
No, it's a continuous cycle.
And this recycling process is just as fascinating as its production,
Absolutely.
with a key player called bilirubin taking center stage.
Bilirubin, that's an important one.
I always think of bilirubin connected with jaundice.
Yes, bilirubin is the pigment that causes the yellowing of the skin, and eye is associated with jaundice.
So let's explore how bilirubin is formed from heme.
Okay.
What happens when heme is broken down?
It all starts with a special enzyme called heme oxygenase.
Heme oxygenase.
It acts like a molecular dismantler, breaking down heme
Okay.
into biliverdin, a green pigment,
A green
but
pigment.
releasing iron and a tiny amount of carbon monoxide.
Wait a minute, carbon monoxide?
Yes.
Isn't that dangerous?
It is in large amounts.
Yeah.
But the tiny bit produced in this process is harmless
Okay.
and even plays a role in cell signaling.
Oh, wow.
It's fascinating how our bodies use even these potentially toxic molecules.
That is interesting.
So we've got biliverdin,
Yeah.
a green pigment. What happens to it?
What happens to it next?
Well, biliverdin is quickly converted into bilirubin,
Bilirubin.
which is actually an antioxidant.
Oh, wow.
It's not all bad.
I always thought of it as just a waste product.
It's often seen that way. But it definitely has important roles to play.
So what happens next?
Well, bilirubin isn't very soluble in water, so it needs a chaperone, a protein called albumin,
Albumin.
to travel through the bloodstream to the liver.
So it hitches a ride
It hitches a ride
to the liver.
to the liver, the processing plant for bilirubin.
Okay, and what happens in the liver?
In the liver, it goes through a transformation called conjugation,
Conjugation.
where it gets attached to glucuronic acid,
Okay,
making it water soluble.
so it's easier to get rid of.
Exactly, ready for excretion.
So the liver is basically making bilirubin easier to flush out of the system.
That's a good way to put it.
And then this conjugated bilirubin is secreted into bile,
Right.
which travels to the intestines for excretion.
That's right.
So that's the end of the line for bilirubin.
Well, not quite.
Not quite.
Things in the body are rarely that straightforward.
Yeah, that's true.
In the intestines, bacteria break down bilirubin
Okay.
into urobilinogen,
Urobilinogen.
which is colorless. Most of it gets turned into stercobilin,
Stercobilin.
the substance that gives coop its brown color.
So that's where that comes from.
That's where it comes from.
I always wondered.
Yeah.
But you said most of the urobilinogen.
Right.
What happens to the rest?
Some of it is reabsorbed
Okay.
and recycled back to the liver,
Back to the liver.
while a small amount goes to the kidneys
Okay.
and is converted into urobilin,
Urobilin.
which gives urine its yellow color.
Wow. It's amazing how everything is connected.
It's a complex and fascinating system.
It really is.
Even in its breakdown, bilirubin is contributing to our bodily functions.
Yeah.
And giving us those characteristic colors.
Well, we were talking about jaundice earlier.
Right.
What happens when this whole bilirubin process gets disrupted?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
Jaundice is a yellowing of the skin and eyes caused by too much bilirubin building up in the blood.
Okay.
And there are different reasons why this buildup might happen.
So there are different types of jaundice.
Exactly.
Okay, tell me more.
Imagine our bilirubin processing system like a factory.
Okay, I like that.
In hemolytic jaundice,
Chromolytic.
the factory is flooded with raw materials.
Okay.
Because red blood cells are breaking down too quickly.
Too quickly.
It's like the delivery trucks just keep coming, overwhelming the system.
So it's not that the factory's broken.
Yeah.
It's just overloaded.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, in hepatocellular jaundice,
Hepatocellular jaundice.
the problem is with the factory itself.
The factory itself.
Liver cells are damaged
Okay.
and can't conjugate bilirubin effectively.
So they can't process it.
It's like a machine on the assembly line breaking down,
I don't know.
causing a backlog.
And this damage to the factory can be caused by things like hepatitis,
Right.
cirrhosis,
Right.
or even too much alcohol.
Exactly. Those are common causes.
Okay.
Finally, we have obstructive jaundice,
Obstructed?
where the issue isn't with production or processing, but with the outflow.
The outflow.
It's like having a blockage in the factory's waste disposal system,
Oh.
causing a buildup of conjugated bilirubin.
So it can't get out.
Exactly. It's processed, but it can't get out.
Okay.
This blockage could be from gallstones,
Okay.
tumors, or inflammation in the bile ducts.
So there are a few different ways that can happen.
That's right.
It sounds like jaundice is a bit like a detective story.
It can be.
You have to figure out what's causing the buildup.
You've got to find the source of the problem.
Oh, okay, so we have these different types of jaundice, each with a unique mechanism.
Exactly.
But you mentioned earlier that it can be more complicated than these simple categories.
Yes. In reality, there can be overlap.
Overlap.
For example, someone with obstructive jaundice might eventually develop liver damage, leading to a mix of both conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin in the blood.
So it's not always so clear-cut.
Exactly. It's not always black and white. Now, there's a particularly interesting case of jaundice we should discuss.
Yes.
Neonatal jaundice, which affects newborns.
Oh, yes, I've heard of that.
It's pretty common.
Good.
Usually it's nothing to worry about.
Okay.
And resolves on its own.
Good.
However, in some cases, it can be more serious.
Okay.
Babies, especially premature ones,
Okay.
often have immature bilirubin processing systems.
Oh.
It's like their liver factory hasn't quite finished construction.
So they can't handle as much bilirubin.
Exactly. This can lead to a buildup of unconjugated bilirubin, which at high levels can be dangerous.
Dangerous. What could happen?
In severe cases, high levels of unconjugated bilirubin can cross the blood-brain barrier
Oh, no.
and cause kernicterus,
Kernicterus.
potentially leading to brain damage.
Oh, wow.
It's a serious complication,
Yeah.
but thankfully there's an effective treatment.
Okay, good.
Phototherapy.
Phototherapy.
Light
therapy.
Light therapy. Babies with jaundice are placed under special blue lights that help break down the excess bilirubin,
Wow, that's amazing.
making it easier for their bodies to excrete.
So something as simple as light can have this effect.
It's a great example of how understanding the underlying mechanisms of a condition
Yes.
can lead to effective treatments.
It really is incredible how much is going on behind the scenes in our bodies.
It is.
And we've only just begun to explore it.
We've only just scratched the surface.
There's more.
Oh, yes, there's much more to come.
I can't wait. What else do we have in store for part 2 of this deep dive?
Well, in part 2, we'll shift gears and explore the diverse roles of fame.
Okay.
We'll dive into how it helps transport oxygen, produce energy, and even detoxify our bodies.
I'm ready.
We'll meet the key players, like hemoglobin, myoglobin, and cytochromes, and see how heme makes them tick.
Sounds fascinating.
It is.
I'm ready to explore the many talents of heme.
Great. Until then, I'll leave you with a thought-provoking question. Given the importance of iron in heme synthesis, how do you think iron deficiency might impact this process? And ultimately, our health?
That's a good one. I'll definitely be pondering that. Join us next time.
Yes.
As we continue our exploration of heme hamming a tiny molecule with a giant impact, welcome back to our deep dive into the world of heme. In part 1, we built heme from scratch, went through its breakdown, and even explored what happens when those processes go wrong.
We saw how this tiny molecule is constantly being made, used, and recycled in a delicate balancing act that's essential for health.
It's incredible how such a tiny molecule plays such a huge role. Now, I'm really curious to learn more about what heme actually does in our bodies.
Right.
I know you mentioned oxygen transport, energy production, and detoxification. Those sound like some pretty big jobs.
They are big jobs.
Yeah.
Let's start with maybe the most well-known function of heme, its role in hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin is the protein in our red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout our bodies. It's what makes our blood red.
Ah, hemoglobin. It's essential for life, but I never really understood how it works.
Right.
So heme is part of this oxygen-carrying protein.
Yes, heme is a crucial part of hemoglobin.
Okay.
Remember how heme has that iron ion nestled in the porphyrin ring?
Yes, I remember the little molecular crown
Exactly.
with the gem in the middle.
That iron is the key.
Okay.
It has this amazing ability to bind to oxygen.
So each hemoglobin molecule with its 4 heme groups acts like a tiny bus picking up oxygen in the lungs and delivering it to different parts of the body.
That's a great way to think about it.
And it's not just a one-way trip, right?
No, it's not.
The iron in heme can bind to oxygen reversibly.
That's right.
Meaning it can pick up oxygen where it's plentiful, like in the lungs.
Yes.
And release it where it's needed in the tissues.
Precisely.
So heme is basically at the heart of respiration.
It is.
The process that keeps us alive.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And heme's involvement in oxygen transport doesn't end there.
Oh, there's more.
There's more.
Okay.
It's also found in myoglobin.
Myoglobin.
A protein similar to hemoglobin, but found in muscle tissue.
So what does myoglobin do?
Think of myoglobin as an oxygen reserve.
Okay.
Ready to provide a quick burst of energy when you need it most?
So when I'm sprinting for the bus or lifting weights, it's myoglobin with heme at its core.
Right.
That's supplying my muscles with that extra oxygen boost.
You got it.
Wow.
It keeps a ready supply of oxygen right where it's needed in the muscles.
Pretty cool.
Now let's move on to energy production.
Okay, energy production.
Heme is a key component of cytochromes.
Cytochromes.
A family of proteins involved in cellular respiration.
Cellular respiration, right?
Yes.
That's like the power plant of our cells turning fuel into energy.
A good analogy.
So how does heme fit into all of this?
Heme is what makes cytochromes so special.
Okay.
It allows them to act as electron carriers.
Electron carriers.
Shutting electrons along what's called the electron transport chain.
Okay, the electron transport chain.
This chain is a series of reactions happening within the mitochondria.
Right, the mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells.
Exactly.
The electron transport chain?
Oh.
My high school biology is getting a bit fuzzy here.
I understand.
Can you break it down a bit further for me?
Sure.
What does it mean for cytochromes to carry electrons?
Okay.
And how does that create energy?
Imagine a relay race.
Okay.
Where a baton is passed from runner to runner. In the electron transport chain, electrons are the baton.
Okay.
And the cytochromes are the runners passing electrons down the line.
I can picture that.
As the electrons move from one cytochrome to the next, they release energy that's used to pump protons across a membrane.
Okay.
This pumping action creates a gradient, like a difference in pressure, which is then harnessed to make ATP the main energy currency of our cells.
So it's like a water wheel using the flow of electrons to power the production of ATP.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Wow, our bodies are so clever.
They are very clever.
And it all hinges on heme's ability to facilitate those electron transfers.
It does.
Within cytochromes.
All right, now let's move on to the third function we talked about.
Okay.
Detoxification.
Detoxification.
Heme is a crucial part of cytochrome P450 enzymes.
Cytochrome P450 enzymes.
Yes.
I've heard that term before.
Have you?
Something to do with how our bodies handle medications, right?
You're exactly right.
Okay.
These enzymes are like the body's processing plant.
Okay.
Modifying and detoxifying drugs, toxins, and other foreign compounds.
So they're like a cleaning crew, making sure harmful substances don't build up in our bodies.
Precisely.
And heme, with its iron ion, is crucial for the function of these enzymes.
The iron interacts with these foreign compounds, facilitating their chemical transformation and allowing them to be eliminated from the body.
Wow. So heme is involved in keeping us healthy by ensuring we can use oxygen-produced energy and even get rid of harmful substances.
It's a great summary.
It's really a jack of all trades.
It is.
And as we've seen, having the right amount of heme is essential for all these processes.
Absolutely.
Too much or too little can have serious consequences for our health.
It's all about balance.
Right. We saw that with the porphyrias,
Yeah.
where problems in heme synthesis can lead to all sorts of problems.
Right.
But before we wrap up part 2, I want to go back to the question you posed at the end of part 1.
Okay.
You asked how iron deficiency might affect heme synthesis and ultimately our health.
Ah, yes. A very important question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, we know iron is a vital component of heme.
Right.
So it makes sense that if someone doesn't get enough iron, their body might struggle to produce enough heme.
That's a logical conclusion.
Could that lead to problems with the processes we've been talking about,
It could.
like oxygen transport or energy production?
You're absolutely on the right track.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So far, we've gone from building heme molecule by molecule to seeing it in action as a key player in oxygen transport, energy production, and detoxification.
It's amazing how much we've covered already.
It really is mind-blowing how such a tiny thing can be so important.
Right.
You left us with a question at the end of part 2.
I did.
How does iron deficiency affect heme and our overall health?
Yeah.
I know we need iron for heme,
Yeah.
so it seems like it would have a pretty big impact.
You are absolutely correct.
Okay.
When someone doesn't get enough iron, their body can't make enough heme.
Okay.
And that can lead to iron deficiency anemia.
Iron deficiency anemia.
It's like trying to bake a cake without enough eggs. It just won't turn out right.
So without enough heme, our red blood cells can't carry enough oxygen.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
That's why people with iron deficiency anemia often feel tired, weak, and short of breath.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Their bodies are literally running low on fuel because they can't get enough oxygen to their cells.
So something as simple as not getting enough iron can have this ripple effect throughout the body,
It really can.
affecting energy levels, oxygen transport, and just overall health.
It highlights the interconnectedness of our biological systems and the importance of a balanced diet.
Speaking of connections,
Yes.
did you know that heme degradation can even have environmental implications?
It's true.
Oh, interesting. I thought we were just talking about what happens inside our bodies.
Yep.
What's the environmental connection?
Well, remember how heme is broken down into biliverdin, which is then converted to bilirubin?
Uh-huh.
That process releases a tiny bit of carbon monoxide.
Right, we talked about that.
Yes.
It's not harmful in the small amounts our bodies produce, but what about on a larger scale?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
When you think about heme being broken down in massive numbers of organisms, not just humans, but animals and bacteria too,
Yeah.
it can actually contribute to the overall levels of carbon monoxide in the environment.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So even something as seemingly insignificant as the breakdown of a tiny molecule can have an impact on our planet.
It's a good reminder that we're all interconnected from the smallest molecules to the largest ecosystems.
This deep dive has been incredibly enlightening. We've gone from building heme to understanding its vital roles in our bodies and even its impact on the environment.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. It's amazing how much we've learned about this tiny molecule.
And for me, the biggest takeaway is how complex and interconnected even the seemingly simple aspects of biology can be.
Yeah,
There's always more to discover.
I couldn't agree more. It makes you realize how much we still don't know about our own bodies and the world around us.
Absolutely. There's so much more to explore.
Well, this deep dive has certainly sparked a sense of wonder in me.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you so much for taking us on this journey through the world of heme.
It's been my pleasure.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
And to all our listeners, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. You never know what amazing discoveries you might make. Until next time on The Deep Dive.